Hi, listeners, and welcome to Season 4 of The Good Pod. Today, I'm joined by someone who hit the ground running the moment he joined our community, Barry, one of our dedicated volunteer drivers. Every Monday, Barry is here making himself available to make sure our neighbors can get to their appointments and stay connected to the greater community. But Barry's commitment to our village goes even deeper than his time behind the wheel. He is an author on the complexities of homelessness and an active member of the Tri-Valley Indivisibles. We are going to get into all the details in this episode, but first, Barry, welcome to the podcast.
It's good to be here.
And thank you so much for being our first guest of Season 4.
Wow.
So I always like to start at the beginning for all of our guests. So how did you first hear about Goodness Village, and what was it that made you want to start volunteering right away?
Well, one of the leaders of our Indivisible group, contacted you guys that heard about Goodness Village and lined up a tour. And if I recall correctly, we had about 9 or 10 show up that very warm day. It was probably July, maybe last summer, and maybe August. And you provided the tour, and none of us had any idea what to expect. And the layout of the place kind of speaks for itself. But it was kind of your professional delivery that tipped it for a lot of us. It just seemed like such a professional environment, certainly a great cause. But we were, some of us were blown away. And at the end of it, you mentioned volunteering aspects, and it wasn't the strong arm approach, and we all appreciated that. And if I'm not mistaken, you and I started trading messages about the driving opportunity and looking at what days you had open and what days might work for me. And I mentioned that I had grandgirls and needed a hard stop at a certain time on Mondays, but we agreed Mondays could work. Let's do it. Went through the screening process and jumped in.
And I actually remember that tour. Thank you so much for jogging my memory about that. It was very sweet. You guys are a very sweet group of people. It was an amazing tour. So you dedicated your Mondays to being a driver for our neighbors. And for our listeners who might not realize how important being a volunteer driver is, can you describe what a typical Monday shift looks like for you?
Certainly. I try to get here by 10. And the first thing I do is go in and check the board, the sign-up board, and see how many have signed up for my shift that Monday. And it's usually 2, 3, 4 people is all. And I talk to somebody in the office, usually Rami, and to find out who's first up and go get that person. We have different meeting spots and find out where they want to head that day. And often it's 2 or 3 stops. And we pick out the route, and it's basically running errands for them. You know, they need to get to the bank, they need to get to the post office, return packages, pick up sundries at Target, doctor's appointments, physical therapy, just everything that you and I need to do to keep our lives going. So we do that, and once the first person is done, then I come back and take the second. We continue that as long as we need to do. Yeah. So.
And can you tell us a little bit about the kinds of conversations that you have?
Yeah, that's its own interesting thing. You know, the first time, and a lot of the neighbors here are female, and a couple of them, we're careful. You know, they don't know who I am the first time, and some of them chose to sit in the back seat. I don't know if that was out of extreme caution or if they thought it was kind of an Uber driver situation. But the first time or two, you're kind of, you're strangers. So you fill up the conversation with talking about the weather and, whether they have heating in their units to keep them warm on a cold night and so on and so forth. But by the second time or third time, it evolves. You're more acquaintances than strangers. So the conversations evolve to where they're comfortable talking about their health ailments, or if there's a government shutdown looming, what that means to them for their benefits and their insecurities. And then if you have somebody 8, 9, 10 times, then little snippets of their past life start to be revealed. And they ask questions of me, and how many children I have and what kind of work I did. And that's kind of the stage where you're starting to become friends of some level. So it'd probably be a good, study for somebody how, the more time you're with somebody, that the conversations really take a different tenor.
I always think it's so beautiful when our volunteers describe our neighbors as friends, because like you said, you always start off as strangers, but by the 8 or 9 or 10th time, you start feeling like friends.
Absolutely.
And that's the whole point of the
Yeah.
volunteer program.
And some people want friends, but some people just need a driver to get them to and from and get them out into the community a little bit. And some just need a good listener. And that's part of the role too.
So speaking of studying and research, you've written a book that touches on homelessness. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Certainly. Thank you for asking. The book is simply called Down, which is a little play on words. Building up in Tacoma is scheduled to be taken down, imploded because it's condemned, and the homeless take it over and rebuild their lives with the support of some community members. And the play on words is that they are just kind of temporarily down. They're between addresses, and it's just a temporary situation. And they're got a little downturn in their lives, and it's going to probably get better.
And so how would you say the research and the writing process for that project change how you view the people that you serve today in our community?
Yeah, once I got the idea, well, I guess I had a belief going into writing the book that not everybody that lived on the street was an addict or an alcoholic or lazy and didn't want to work. And so the research that I did, and I couldn't really force myself to live out on the streets. I couldn't take that risk in my living situation and my obligations, but I had to get next to homeless people, and I mean really interact with them. And I found different situations that enabled me to do that. And so going through that exercise really confirmed in my mind that people end up homeless for a whole bunch of reasons. And most often, and I don't know what the percentages are, but it could be 38%, 52, 68% that didn't start out as addicts. That's kind of what I found out. And it's true in Goodness Village. I've had people, the first time they get in the car with me, say, we're not all addicts and alcoholics. And I said, I know, I believe that.
Thank you so much for saying that. That was beautiful. Which is a perfect segue to my next question. So because of your experience kind of putting yourself in maybe a slightly uncomfortable situation, interacting with people you probably wouldn't have otherwise interacted with, what is something that you wish the greater community understood about homelessness as a whole?
And it's just that point. After I did my my novel, there's book clubs that invite you to come in and meet and greet or do a Q&A thing. And I actually had a couple of those sessions where people wanted to argue with me that the homeless are just alcoholics and drug addicts and lazy. And I said, no, that's not my experience. And they couldn't relinquish that. So I'm not sure how widespread that belief is anymore, but I certainly can't stress enough that is erroneous. And that people just don't understand how you can become homeless. There's a whole bunch of different ways. Spousal abuse. I think the most common one that I ran into was job loss / insurance loss, married with some sort of significant health issue. and you lose your living situation. You might lose your car. You might lose your spouse. I mean, the safety net just falls apart so quickly. And all of a sudden, you're there dependent upon social services. And, there's no question that living on the street is extremely difficult, probably more so for women. But it can lead to, drug use and alcohol use just because it's so difficult and it's around you. So, I'm not, saying there isn't that, but a lot of people don't start out that way.
Absolutely. But people kind of get hung up on the substance use and the mental health and other circumstances.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's such an old, tired script.
Mm-hmm. So since you started volunteering with us, is there a specific interaction or moment that's really stayed with you?
Yeah. There's several that made an impact. Can I mention two? And they're quite different.
Absolutely.
One of the neighbors who had been with me, driving with me for many times, has chronic ailments and talked about needing 3 or 4 surgeries. And often our drives included visits to doctors or physical therapy. And I could tell she was in great pain. I had to help her get in and out of the car and to and from wherever she was going. And she's miserable, and going through social services, she can't even figure out the order, or they can't figure out the order of the surgeries that she needs. And so after we had been together maybe 8 or 9 times, she mentioned how her life was changed. She was a home health care provider. I don't know if a full-fledged RN or not, it doesn't matter, it was a profession. And she was trying to turn somebody in bed that was way overweight. She estimates maybe 400 pounds. And that person fell on her. And together they were trapped for 12 hours till somebody figured out there was a problem and came in and checked on them. And she had severe back issues, vertebrae issues, shoulder, hip, a knee might be in their neck. And she will never be the same. But it's such a great example of how a life can change. I mean, it's a horrible story in an instant. Mm-hmm. And it's also a great example of how people can, the common people just have no idea how you can end up homeless. And she lost her insurance at some point in time, could no longer work, and was dependent upon whatever social services could offer. Mm-hmm. And the second one, another neighbor had been with me, 6 or 8 times, and she was a talker, is a talker, and we always had a route of 2 or 3 or 4 things that we'd swing by, and we'd gone by her bank in Dublin a couple of times, and says, I got to go by the bank today. I said, okay, so she's very mobile, so I didn't need to go in with her, but she went in and came back in 4 or 5 minutes, with holding a bunch of money and handed me a 10. And I said, what's this for? She says, well, that's for you. I appreciate you so much and everything you do and this and that. And I said, yeah, thank you, but that's not how this works. Mm-hmm. And she says, no, I got to do it. I appreciate you so much. We went through that a couple more times, and I kept trying to deflect. And finally she says, God told me to do it. And so I thought, well, I don't want to get sideways with you, but I certainly don't want to get sideways with God. So I took it, and reluctantly, but it made an impact. It was such a cute story, I thought. But that $10 bill may find its way back to her or one of the other neighbors here.
And I'm so glad you brought that story up, because it can be sometimes uncomfortable to accept gifts from people that you feel like you're supposed to be serving without getting anything in return.
Yeah. There's an awkwardness, probably on both parties. You didn't ask this, but I have an additional belief about volunteering that has been at play for a long time, and I stole it from somebody else. But it really only counts if you do good works really only counts if the people cannot repay you, that there's no possible way of them repaying you, that somehow counts more. And I think it's an interesting spin on volunteering and doing good works. So this kind of blew my whole thing when people, the people I'm driving, want to stop and get a sandwich, and the real idea is to split half of it with me, or let's go by a bakery and I'm going to get something, but I want to get something for you, and then this $10 bill. So God bless them. I mean, they're so nice. The staff here appreciates all the volunteers, and that's usually the way it is, in these types of volunteer situations. But I get a double dose from the people I drive, the neighbors. And so it kind of blows my whole thing about doing it when nobody can possibly repay me.
They will always find a way to try and repay you.
They're sneaky that way, yes.
They are. So as we said in the beginning, you did not hesitate to get started with us. A lot of times I give a volunteer a tour and they're saying, let me do meal pickups or let me do something small and kind of work my way up to something larger. But you decided to commit to driving, and not only driving, but once a week, every week. And so what would you say to someone who's listening who maybe might be intimidated or feels like they want to help but don't really know how they would fit in this environment?
Yeah, I think in a lot of situations, there's hesitancy or uncertainty about the unknown, what you're getting into, whether it's changing schools or getting a new job or certainly volunteering. You don't know how it's going to play out. I would say if you have an inclination, if you have a time, especially if you have the time, if you have a little skill set, but this job that I have here at Goodness Village requires no skill. It really doesn't. Stay between the lines, get here on time, and that's about it, And, but if you have an inclination to do it, don't hesitate too long. Give it a try. You can eject at any point if it's not for you, but it's probably going to be for you. You'll get back way more than what you put into it, and that's the truth.
And volunteers tell me all the time that I feel so much better after I volunteer.
It's a nice part of my life, yeah. And I have no intention of giving it up soon, so.
Thank you. You guys heard that. Mondays are taken for some time. So before we wrap up, I have a fun segment for season 4 of the podcast that I'm very excited to launch.
Oh, dear.
Yours is called In the Driver's Seat because you do so much behind the wheel action for us. So I have
Is this like the lightning round or something?
Yes, it is. So you can take your time answering the questions, but I have a few questions about life on the road and your life behind the scenes with Goodness Village. So we're going to get started. Cue the fun game show music. Barry, when you're driving for the village, what's your go-to radio station or playlist to keep the vibes right?
Yeah. It's generally calming music. I have actually asked people, what their music preferences are. I've found Spotify playlists that suit them. A couple of people like jazz. One person likes old time, like Frank Sinatra, Perry Como type music. So if there's a lull in the conversation, those get woven in. But generally, it's kind of calm, popular, not edgy music at all. I'm inclined to throw in my personal music tastes of Tom Petty, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Seger, but haven't done so yet.
I'm sensing the music lover in you, and I really appreciate that. Yeah. So if you could have any celebrity or historical figure sit in the passenger seat for a drive, who would it be?
Yeah, I think I'd lean towards MLK or Gandhi, somebody along those lines. Yeah.
Okay. So what was the very first car you ever owned?
A 68 Montego.
Nice.
White. It looked like a undercover cop car.
Really?
Yeah, and I got it at the end of high school, and it did confuse some people. Yeah.
I bet that was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And since you're driving all over the Tri-Valley, what would you say is your favorite hidden gem in town that everyone should visit?
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. This might reveal too much of me. I like the Sunshine Saloon now. I don't go there often in Pleasanton, but it's really good for games. I was invited to go there yesterday for football, but had another event and so passed on that. But there's some nice little restaurants. It's not a hidden gem. Andy and Yu's, Chinese food. Nice. A couple of my people that I drive, neighbors, like that one as well. There's probably others that I'm going to regret not thinking of on the moment, but yeah.
Yeah, these are on the fly, so top of the mind.
Okay.
Shout out to Sunshine Saloon, by the way. They let us do our fall fundraiser there every year.
Really?
Yes, so
nice.
that was perfect.
Okay.
Not
Well,
sponsored.
Yeah, you didn't set me up for that, but it's a nice place.
Last question for you. What's your go-to snack after a long day of errands?
Well, when I pick up the grand girls, Bertie and Dixie, we have a tradition of build our own sundaes at our house. We take them in, and that usually happens before homework. And so they get to boss me around. They're 8 and 10 years old, but this has been going on for at least 6 years. So they get to direct me, and they like that position. So I build sundaes for them, and that's a tradition. And they sit together. We all sit together, and they tell a lot of stories, and it's a good playtime and a connection for us. So that's probably my go-to.
Nice, and what a beautiful memory for them.
Hope so.
So before we finish off, I want you to finish the sentence. Being a good neighbor means ...
It's being available, helping out. I grew up in San Leandro in a true neighborhood that I haven't seen since. There were 6 or 8 different families, and we got together for impromptu barbecues, just drop-ins. You didn't have to schedule a week in advance. They played card together with my parents, maybe 3 or 4 nights a week, and it was just somebody pick up the phone and call the other person and arrange something almost impromptu. We do camping vacations with 5 or 6 other families for a week or 2 at a time. Nice. That doesn't happen in my life since. So, and we all knew that if there was any situation, financial, health, you're locked out of your house, there was a whole bunch of people you could phone or knock on their door, or if you could get to them, and they would take care of you.
No questions asked.
So there's being a good neighbor here, has some limitations to being able to do that, but that's in my life. I'd like to see a little bit more of that on my street.
Well, thank you for building that sense of good neighborliness here. We appreciate it, and we sense it, and we really feel it.
Well, I appreciate being here.
So before we let you go, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, without this sounding like a lecture, if you have an inclination to volunteer, there's so many places that you're needed, whether you have a special skill set or not. It's easy to find, doing Google searches. Just jump in. You're needed. You'll be valued. You'll be appreciated, and just give it a try.
Barry, thank you so much for sharing your Mondays with us. Thank you for kicking off season 4 of our podcast with us, and for your community work in the Tri-Valley. We're so lucky to have you in the driver's seat, literally and figuratively.
Well, I'm lucky to be here. Thanks for including me.
And as always, listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to The Good Pod, share this conversation with your community, and stay tuned for more stories. And remember, being a good neighbor isn't about where you live, it's about how you show up. Until next time. Thank you for listening to the Goodness Village podcast. Production and recording was done by the Goodness Village operations team with support from Crosswinds Church. Music was provided by Blue Dot Sessions. If you want to know more about Goodness Village, visit us at gvlivermore.org. Thanks again for listening to The Good Pod.